Hey everyone, how's it going? And welcome back to another Demystifying Post-Production Motion Monday. My name's Elly, I'm a trainer at Maxon, and for the final time this month, but hopefully not ever again, I'm joined with Ana, Dustin, and Chad. How's it going, guys? It's good to be with you today.
Good. You too.
Happy Monday,
I have to
everybody.
mention that it was like our last session. Now I'm like all sad.
But it won't be the last time, I'm sure, we're all together again. I'm hoping it's not the last time we're all together again.
Yeah.
And I do want to say hey to everyone in the chat that's here live with us. Hey to Jim, Bern, Marcelo, Charles, Jay, Drake, Wesley, Anders, Joel, Brian. It's nice to have you guys with us on this live. So before I hand over to Chad and we hear about all the amazing stuff we're going to be doing on this final part of this series, I want to talk to you about the other great stuff that's happening this week and also next month. So as we can see today, we have part 4 of our Demystifying Post-Production series, Sculpt, Model, Render, Composite. And very quickly, I'm going to get through this stuff so we can hand over to Chad, because I know he's got so much cool stuff to show. Oh, my Siri likes to talk to me as I am doing that. So Siri doesn't understand, but hopefully everyone else understands. And on Wednesdays, we have part 4 of our hands-on with Max on Cinema 4D Level Up workshop, where we're going to be doing some stuff inside of Cinema 4D and inside of Redshift, all to do with motion design. So a bunch of the MoGraph tools, some cool stuff with vertex maps, and some little bits of Redshift on the side as well. And then you may notice we have an Ask the Trainer special. So normally every second and fourth Thursday, we run an Ask the Trainer with the training team. We run a YouTube live, but we have a 5th week in June. And so what that means is we thought we'd run another Meet the Trainers special version of Ask the Trainer. So we're going to try and get a whole bunch of the team on there, talk about our stories, our insights, and just stuff that we've all, been like doing with our professional lives, how we got into the world of Maxon, the world of Cinema 4D. So it should be a lot of fun. And next month, we have a brand new Demystifying Post-Production series, which currently isn't on the events page, but it will be very soon, I think in the next couple of days, which is going to be all to do with particles. And that's not just inside of Cinema 4D. I believe Chad can maybe help me here. It's going to be Houdini, Particular, After Effects, C4D, X Particles. What have I missed? Anything?
No, that's pretty much it. I think we're gonna do like a smidge of Unreal particles, but yeah, I think you covered all the bases.
Sweet. Cool. So if you actually head over to Simon Walker's Twitter, you can find the registration link, or let me know and I can ping you this link in the questions area or the chat area today. But as I said, it will be on that events page for you guys to register in the next couple of days. And if you ever miss any of our sessions or want to see what live streams we have coming up for Maxon Color and Ask the Trainer, all you have to do, head over to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel and you get this lovely page here. Also, all of these links, including the project file links, can be found in the handout section of GoToWebinar. And we also have this special merch page here where you guys can actually get a free t-shirt. All you have to do, pay for shipping. I believe the code is 3D Workflows for that. So yeah, you can represent along with our training team. Okay, cool. So as I said, I wanted to get through that quite quickly. Just so I can hand over to Chad now and he can tell us about the great stuff that we're going to be doing on this final part of this series. So Chad, what are we doing today?
Well, let me see. Can I share my screen?
Yes, let me throw it over to you. There you go.
Okay. Show my screen. Okay, you're seeing that? Seeing little Carl action?
Oh my God, he looks great.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind. So this week is a little bit weird. Yeah, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn off my webcam because I'm not at home. So I don't know how. I might turn that back on. But please interrupt me and all this kind of stuff, whenever you want to. So, the original thinking of this whole thing, just like to bring it all back home, is that, this conversation that Ana and Elly and I had together. And Ana was talking about these worlds that she makes and these creatures that she makes, and talking about like, oh, we could do these things with cinema and do these things with After Effects. And so, a lot of people that are like really great specialists in 3D are often not as aware of like what After Effects even does. Like, what's the point? Especially after seeing the last couple of weeks of what Elly made. I mean, like what she made was like absolutely incredible. So like, why do we even have After Effects? What's the whole point? And so this is going to be kind of like directed almost like towards Ana or someone else that, you know, might be new in that world. And so that's gonna be like the first half, is we're gonna look at like what I did with Carl. And I don't know that I'm like insanely happy with what I made. So this is not gonna be like, here's how I made this amazing thing, behold all of its glory. But there's a lot of interesting like workflow techniques and you know, things that we could do back and forth, like some decisions that we need to make. And so we're gonna be talking about some of those decisions, whether we want to do that in Cinema, whether we want to do that in After Effects, and the trade-offs of those. And so that's gonna be the first half of today. And then the second half of today, we're actually going to hop over into Houdini, because I made another underwater scene. And it was a really interesting project. And using that project with Houdini and After Effects, we're gonna be able to see some other kind of like some other things that aren't as clear with the Carl, because the Carl project is like very robust and kind of complex. So it's kind of tougher to see exactly what's going on all the time. So the other project with Houdini is gonna be a little bit more simple. And we're gonna be doing some like crazy stuff with Mir and HeightFields and some really interesting stuff that I've never done before. So I think it's gonna be pretty fun. So this is like the final that I came up with for Carl here. You know, he moves his head and it's like tentacles are like moving around and whatnot.
Sorry, couldn't hold it in.
That's right. That's very kind of you. But yeah, there's some interesting things happening here, and again, like it speaks to the strengths of After Effects and what that gives us as part of the workflow. And so I started in Cinema, and one of the things that I did, well, actually one of the things that happened was we had a bunch of technical difficulties getting Carl renders out of Cinema well. So like the Redshift renders we were having issues with or whatever. So then Elly just gave me the whole Cinema 4D file. And I'm really, really grateful that it happened that way, because then I was able to set things up the way that I normally would have if I was in like a normal workflow. Like because of these like these sessions, usually it's just kind of like, here's the stuff, here's the renders, and you pass them on down the chain. But if I was working in a real workflow, I would be more of a jerk about things. I'd be more like, oh no, actually I want things like this and I want things like this. And so because of that, I had access to the Cinema 4D file. I broke things up in the way that I normally would. So say for example, I'm gonna get out of the cam view. Oh, that's a bad move. Okay, so I am on a laptop, not at home. And so let me put that back on. So trying to navigate for me is like very difficult with like a laptop here. But what I would normally do here is I would break this up, because you know we have this like static image, and if we rendered it out like the way we were initially planning on, then this would just be like entirely a flat image. I wouldn't be able to do anything with it in After Effects. So what I wanted to do is like I would select something like this, and then I would isolate it, and I would create another file maybe, and then delete everything else and render out just this thing. And then I would go over to this coral and isolate it, delete everything, make a new file with it, render out just this. Then I did the midground, and I created all of these separate layers so that when I came into After Effects, I had the flexibility. So if you see like I animated a camera that's pushing in, you see if I scrub it like fast, you can see like a little bit more. And that way I have like depth cues. So I can actually move this stuff on the side, these coral pieces on the sides, like I could move those like way closer to camera. And so then I push in my camera, and it's like we're moving into this world a bit, which is pretty cool. And I don't have that flexibility if it's a flat render. I mean, I have like object buffers and things that I could do to kind of isolate these and get an alpha channel for these things, but it doesn't give me the flexibility to see the stuff behind them. And so by having those here, I'll just select this here, and I'll go and I'll find it in my stack here, and then I'll just like turn it off. Oops, no, that's not what I want to do. Move to, hide that, there we go. So then like, it's like this, if I have those objects all separated, they're separate renders, then I have access to all of the content that's behind the arches, where if you're just rendering out like alpha channels, object buffers, Cryptomattes, puzzle mats, all those kind of things where you're just getting the object buffers, you don't have access to the stuff that's behind it here. So then you can't do as much in After Effects. So I really wanted to be able to play with this in After Effects. Another thing that I did is let me close this up here, is I went into Carl, and Dustin helped me with this actually from last week. And Dustin's probably like, I didn't help you with anything, what are you talking about? But last week, you know, we were trying to select the eyes And you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna hit like F, no, H. Yes, okay, sure. Let's see if I can't use my trackpad skills.
If you do the
S?
S key,
S. Oh,
if you do
okay.
S, it should frame selection. I believe.
Okay. I thought it was F as in Frank, but okay, never mind. That's fine. This is fine. So one of the things that I did is I went into good old buddy polygon mode, and I used the trick that Dustin taught us last time. So I could select, oops, no, here's my selection tool, and I'll select like some part of the head, and then I can select UW. And I remember that because University of Washington. I live in Seattle, and so University of Washington is next to me. So UW is a very easy to remember shortcut. So I could select all these different components. I could just like select the tentacles and then UW. It selects all the tentacle. And then what I did is I duplicated this a bunch of times in the object manager and then pressed UI, another easy to remember shortcut, and I would hit delete. So I just kept duplicating this and then deleting all the pieces until I had all these things as separate pieces. So then when I rendered it out here in After Effects,
Chad,
yes?
I could have shown that there's a different way that you could do that.
Oh, okay, teach me.
Yeah,
Teach me. What
you can convert what are called polygon islands to objects. So then it would given you all of the individual islands as objects. Yeah,
what do I
yeah.
do? Can you pilot me through that right now?
Yeah,
Like
so if you select
okay, I'll select
and
it
then
all.
you go up to, oh, this is going to test me now.
Oops.
No.
No.
Is it tools at the top in your top menu?
Tools.
And then at the bottom, convert.
And
then polygon islands to objects.
Objects. What?
And then drop down Carl. And then you can...
Oh my word.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
The
Matt
amount
showed
of
this
stuff that
to me like a year ago, and I was like, why have I only just found out about this?
Man, I can't believe how much you know about cinema and also how little I know. And so it's a great team. That's amazing. Cool. Thank you. Also, thank you for stopping me and showing me that. That's so great.
No worries. No worries.
So through the very long method, I brought over all these different pieces, and I organized them like this. And this is like what I first saw when I brought everything into After Effects. So everything's on a separate layer, and I forgot to render out a Cryptomatte. Like I thought it was like already like built in, but there's only a Cryptomatte on the background. And actually, let me show you the background really quick. This is a headless Carl. The Carl of Sleepy Hollow, someone might call it. So if I apply the Cryptomatte to this, what's pretty cool is I could click in this section here. Oh, hey, wait. What's the deal? I know this works because I just, I did it. I did it in the other thing. I did it in the other project. So what typically happens is you click in this thing and then a pop-up comes up, and then you can click on, well, let me see if I could just go to my final here. And we have, one of these things. Oh, it was the matte. Oh, background Cryptomatte, here we go. So I'll solo this, and I'll turn off the Gaussian blur. And so then here it's, this is kind of like what it's like. So this is like the Cryptomatte, and by default it's set to colors. So then you see all the colors of everything, and you could click on any of the things that have a Cryptomatte applied to it. And you see that like, I just set this one background, flat background to render, and just set Cryptomatte, and it automatically gives every object its own color when you get here in After Effects. And you just literally click on any of these things, or shift click and select multiple things. And then once you select multiple things, it shows up here in the selection. And then I can change the output to matted colors, and it just shows me, like it gives me a white version of just those things. So I was able to create a matte of just those things. So that's how a Cryptomatte works, which is really, really helpful, but I didn't use that much other than in the background because I forgot. So then the question becomes, well, what do I do then? Because I have this thing. So what I did is I applied the extractor effect, and I don't know how much we want to get into this. There's so many little details and nuances here that we could go on to for a long time, but like the colors are off a little bit. You notice too that when you apply the extractor effect, the colors shift. So I play around with the color spaces a little bit. I'm in the ACES color space, ACES working space, so that I could get as close as I could. But I couldn't figure out how to change the color shift to stop that from happening. But if I click in the layers drop down here, you could see all the different passes that we have. I have like beauty, here's the Cryptomatte, but typically that doesn't, oh, I guess that's working here. But typically the extractor doesn't, from my experience, is not reliable with Cryptomattes. So yeah, you have to use the Cryptomatte effect in After Effects and not extractor, but here it looks like it's working. But I have like the depth pass, I have all these different passes that I can use. So let's say, like, for example, I want to use the beauty here, but then for the alpha, there's no alpha channel. So I need to use something different. So I went through all these different, when you actually choose one of the channels, then you get access to individual channels. So not just the beauty pass, but the red, green, and blue of the beauty pass, and so on and so forth. So what I did is I found the position, I think I did position red, and that basically gave me an alpha channel. And so then what I did, there's like a little bit of like an outline around this. So I applied the simple choker effect and choked this back a little bit to get rid of that fringing on the matte. And then what I can do is select these effects and shift click, and then Command or Control C to copy this. And then I could go down to everything else and then Command V to paste. And then now I have my scene here. And because I separated these things individually, then I can, again, I could put them into 3D space, press P for position, and I could move them separately. And so then if I have a camera in here, then I could move through this in a more realistic way where I get parallax and whatnot. So just by doing a couple of little extra steps, then I have a little bit of separation, and that's really what I was after here. So I also separated all the tentacles here. So I did it clockwise, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that I could play with them a little bit. And one of the things, just like as some options of what you can do with tentacles, because they're separated, I can now do After Effects-y things with them. So for example, I can go to this little push pin thing, and this is the puppet tool, and I can like click on these points, click points on this, and there we go. And then now I can move this around, and then I have this deal here. I have this, I could move the tentacle around and animate it that way, play if I want with that way. Now, some of you might be saying, well, that just doesn't look as realistic as rigging it and animating it that way, like in Cinema 4D. And yes, of course, it doesn't look as good at all. Like the lighting is not going to change as we move the tentacles around. And this really gets at what I want to get to about this whole workflow between Cinema 4D and After Effects when you're doing things in compositing. So like the process of rigging and animating tentacles in 3D is not a simple, quick, easy thing, nor is it a very flexible thing. So if like I send, I do a render where I rig this and then I animate the tentacles and I send it to a supervisor for approval and they don't like it and I have to redo it, that's a lot of work. And then a lot of re-rendering and that whole thing. But if I'm here in After Effects, it doesn't look as great, but it's very, very flexible. So for something like this, that's kind of like not super close in the foreground, I have a lot of latitude of how I want to fiddle with this. And that's pretty great. That's pretty great. And this is, again, the whole workflow of Cinema 4D to After Effects in a nutshell. And if you're going to do it in After Effects, it's not going to look as great typically. You're not going to have as much flexibility. You're going to have to make little cheats like with the light coming in and things like that. But you are going to be able to move much more efficiently and quickly and render out tests much more quickly. So you might have noticed that Elly set up all of these like really great things in Cinema, like these redshift particles, like little bubbles, and this beautiful like streaming light from behind, this beautiful volumetric light. And I turned all that stuff off intentionally, which killed me because Elly's stuff was gold. But that's how I would do this in the real world. I would turn off all that stuff because if I have a volumetric light coming from the back and then streaming down, that really limits what I'm able to do in compositing. Like if I'm going to do this like hack thing with the puppet tool and move the tentacles around, then it's going to be very obvious that it's not moving through the streaming light. So oftentimes what the workflow is I have to turn stuff off in Cinema 4D to then recreate it in After Effects. So same thing with the bubbles. I turned off of her redshift bubbles because then if I wanted to do some kind of particle motion, whatever, that's baked into the frame and I don't have the flexibility to really do anything about it. So instead, I turned it off there and then recreated it with Particular here, so that that way I had flexibility over how things worked and how they're distorted and where they're going and when they come on and everything else. I have that flexibility. So do they look as good as if they were like natively in the scene? No, it doesn't look as good, but I have a lot more control and flexibility, and that's the whole point of doing things in After Effects.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Chad, we've had conversations about this, I believe, on other series as well. You know, a lot of this really boils down to, like, if you're working in, say, a production environment, would be knowing, you know, the client expectations and like what they need. You know, I've ran through many times, you know, in the industry or just even, you know, freelancing where, you know, what we want to do and what we need to do or what the client needs is you know, can often be two different things. And so, you know, as artists, we want to sit and rig this and do this all, you know, like in a rendered format. And oftentimes, like, you can get away with the cheats and the workflow, you know, kind of hacks that you're doing now. So it's, you know, I wouldn't say that it doesn't even necessarily look as good. Like, this may be something that a client needs versus what an artist wants. And I think that's, you know, it's a very good thing to understand, you know, as you start to enter, you know, production environments or even freelancing in this type of work.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you were like, if this object of Carlson, like in the background, and he kind of like is, you know, set back a bit, you know, so you can have some wiggle room with playing with some stuff. But like, that's very important to be able to understand all of the ramifications of that workflow. So because the client came to you and said, hey, I have $1,000 and I need this tomorrow. Well, like, you're not going to be able to go back and forth and, you know, rig these tentacles in Cinema and be able to go back and forth and get tests and approval and like all that kind of stuff and do all that. So like the only way that you can pull that off is by, you know, doing like, knowing how to fake it in After Effects like that. So being able to recreate stuff in After Effects is, I think, is a really helpful skill. And yeah, like you said, knowing where those allowances are, what you can get away with based on the lighting and the subject matter and the budget and the schedule, all that kind of stuff is like really helpful for sure.
Definitely.
Thanks.
Good, cheap, fast. Pick two.
Yes. Thanks, man. Thanks for interjecting. I love playing the comments and whatever. So another thing to keep in mind is that there are other ways to warp this. And so I used a combination in my final Carl. If you look at these two, that's like tentacle 1 and tentacle 6. I use a little bit of puppet tool. So if we look at the first frame, they're kind of like over here, like pointed towards the left. And the last frame, they're moving over towards the right. And they are kind of also doing like a little bit of wiggling still too. And they are kind of like bending a little bit, and it's kind of curvy. And the way I pulled that off is with an effect called Wave. There's two effects. There's Wave World and Wave Warp. And I always get confused. Wave World builds waves. It's not as handy in this day and age, but like Wave Warp does what I'm looking to do. It's kind of like an auto animating wave warp effect. So if I preview this, you can see that it kind of does this type of thing. And like many things in After Effects, the default settings look really bad. So we have to like maybe take this wave height down to like 5, maybe wave width down to like 20 or something. And maybe we come from a different direction with our waves here. Maybe we take wave speed down to like 0.1, and maybe we pin the left side, the left edge of this. And that still looks like it's too much. Maybe we need to actually up our wave width so it's a little bit smoother. There we go. And now as we preview this, it's not perfect because I'm just kind of like, you know, guessing and fiddling around. But we're now kind of like in the neighborhood where we have something kind of believable. And so now we have this kind of like direction. It's like kind of like going up very slowly. So we could play with, you know, wave speed, wave height, all these different things to create this sense that these tentacles are kind of, you know, wobbly and kind of moving along with the water. So that's what I did with like all 6 tentacles here. And you can kind of see that like this one right here is not animated other than like the wave warp thing. but it still has kind of like life to it, like it's moving and kind of like undulating as if it's kind of being, you know, moved around by some waves there. So it took a little bit of fiddling to get that, but there's that. Also, another thing you're noticing that I did here is that I rigged up parenting, which is another cool thing you could do. So I could parent all of these tentacles, like select all of them, and then using this little like curly Q thing, I could like go and say, this is the parent, this head thing. So now if I rotate my head, then the tentacles, whoops, anchor point's not in the right spot. So that's like, it's like a carnival game. Hit the Carl, win the teddy bear. But what I'm going to do here is I could go to, I'm going to hold down the letter Y. That gives me the shortcut for the anchor point tool called the pan behind tool. And then I let go of Y once I get it in the right spot. And now when I rotate this, it rotates around that circle. So the tentacles are all still individual objects, but they move with the head when the head moves and rotates, which is pretty powerful, allows me to do some cool things. Another thing that I did, and I won't go into detail with this because it took a lot of steps, but I used the Venetian blind effect on the eyes. I used the emission pass. So if I go into layers and I go into emission, and let me actually like solo this. So if I go into the emission pass, then you could see that the emission we have is a separate layer. I still get the alpha channel stuff, so I had to, again, go in through with the alpha channel and do some like weird matting things to get that to work. But then I used the Venetian blinds effect. Let's see, I'll go ahead and open this up so you can see what's going on. So my final version, I had the head and tentacles, and then I created this mat where I used the Venetian blinds effect, which creates Venetian blinds, these like horizontal lines. And I use this as a mat to have the eyes kind of like open. So like, there's the eyes opening. And then I use that to create this like emissive thing where the eyes are kind of like opening there. And then I use like Trapcode Shine and some other like effects to kind of like make that kind of streak a little bit. You know, one of the interesting things that I ran into with this project that I thought was like pretty fun actually was, you know, trying to create this sense that this is an underwater scene, because, you know, CG stuff is like so clean that, you know, we really want to kind of like gunk up the works. We want to create chaos and dirt and grime in the environment, and stuff like that is like much more challenging to do in the world of After Effects, or in the world of Cinema 4D. And it's so much easier to do in After Effects because it's a 2D application. So I could create like one of the things I created was like this gunk layer. So if I look at this, this was just kind of like a fractal noise layer that I created and just had it like rising up. And then I just fiddled with like the blend mode and the matte, and then like it's just kind of, you know, it's dialed back really just like a little bit here. But if I turn this off and then turn this on, you can see the difference that it makes. Just like a little just gunk in the water. But like if you were actually like down under the deep where this creature lives, there would be these kind of like, you know, gunky things. And so then also too, there's like this bottom darkener where I just took a black solid and just kind of like, you know, masked it out and just added like a little bit of darkness. You can see the before and after. It's just a little bit. It's just a little bit. But that's what we're trying to do, is to kind of use all these effects together to create the sense that we're underwater and we're in a different environment. So we want to make the air feel thick, and so that's what we did there. Another thing that I did, I think that made a really big difference, is turbulent displace. Turbulent displace is another effect that warps. It's not automatic like wave warp, but I'll show you here in this comp because it'll be a little bit easier to navigate. But I'm going to create an adjustment layer using Command Option Y or Control Alt Y on the PC. And then everything that we do to this adjustment layer affects all the layers beneath. So I can apply this turbulent displace, I'm sorry. Apply that there. And by default, it's like kind of ridiculous. You can see what it's doing. That the values are really ridiculous. I guess you can see it, and it doesn't auto animate. But I can use this evolution, and you can see kind of like what's going on. It's meant for like kind of flag waving and things like that. But I found this really to be invaluable to be able to create the distortion I was looking for to create like this underwater scene. So I took down size, took down amount a lot, and you know I kept going back and forth on these settings because you could do a lot actually. I mean, you could make it work with low size and high amount or vice versa. Like you could just kind of fiddle with this and get higher frequency noise or less frequency noise, whatever. I animated offset turbulence in the Y direction. So it's kind of like going up. It's giving this sense of like rising. So you can see like kind of going through this that like we're kind of creating this like warble through everything. And it kind of creates a sense that everything is warbling. And that's how kind of how it would be if you were looking through a lens and seeing everything there. So then,
That's
yeah.
so cool, by the way. Sorry to like
Thank
totally
you.
interrupt, but that is so cool, and it makes such a massive difference.
Thank you.
I love
Yeah,
that.
I think
That's
it does
great.
like, just kind of like, yeah, just like it's kind of like your eye there, just kind of like warbles a little bit. And I love to, and we'll see in the next example as well with the Houdini thing, just like taking the human face and like warping it. Like, I don't know, something about that is very off-putting. So anytime like you can use a human face and just kind of like warp it like that, it's very
Yeah, it's
disturbing.
like
It's
eerie and spooky.
it is
I
here.
like
Yeah,
it.
we know how the human face should look. So when you go messing with it, it's a really quick way to create an uncomfortable thing. Before I jump over to the Houdini thing, one of the things that I wanted to mention as well, if I had more time with this, there is a really interesting challenge, and that is the floor. Because, you know, I have the like the left foreground isolated. Oops, I guess I have two left foreground. There we go. And then I also have like the right foreground isolated, and I have the midground isolated. And so that way they're you know, staggered in Z space, and I could do this kind of like parallax move that I was showing you. But the thing is if this ground were more detailed, we would see the illusion that this column here is not really perfectly aligned with the ground, because think about the ground here, the floor. It's you know, we think of it as like going back in Z space, right? But it's really just rendered. Like these pixels and these pixels are just flat to the camera, and there's no difference. So when you start pushing in the camera, if you had like, let's say a checkerboard pattern and we're pushing in, we're really going to be able to tell very quickly that this is not going to work, because the ground doesn't go back in 3D space. So one of the things that I was playing with, and one of the things that I would have done if I had more time, is that I would have turned off the ground in Elly's layer, and I would have brought the same height map here, the same thing that she used, the Josh Pierce display. I believe that was a Josh Pierce map, right? Elly, was that a Josh Pierce map?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Also, as well, I'm just to take this little opportunity. He's also said that I'm allowed to share it. So shout out to Josh Pierce, so I can share it with the project file, which is pretty cool.
He's such an amazing artist, and he's such a good guy. So I love being able to shout him out. That's great.
Yeah, big up Josh.
So here's here's what I would do. I would use Trapcode Mir, and so I'm gonna apply Mir. And Mir is like this interesting wacky effect, right? And actually, I'm gonna turn off the floor. I made this little like a gradient background. And we're gonna be doing this a little bit more with Houdini, but it's actually gonna be easier to see in this instance. I'm going to go to my shader, and I'm gonna change this from density to smooth. And I'm going to take the blend mode from add to off. So now it's just kind of like a regular white piece of mesh. And so you can see this a little bit better. I'm going to create just a point light, whatever. And I'll just tint this just ever so slightly, just so we can see what's going on. There we go. And then what I can do with Mir, because it's using like a fractal map to displace it, I can open the fractal section. And as I, you know, adjust the evolution, we could kind of see that there's an invisible fractal map displacing this thing. What I can do is take frequency down to, let's say, 0. So no fractal displacement. And then what I can do is use an amplitude layer. So I'm going to use the Josh Pierce floor as the map here. And then I could crank up the amplitude. We start to see that we're going to get the same deal that we had in Cinema, that Elly created in Cinema. So then I could go over here to like the geometry and maybe like rotate it on the x-axis. And of course we would maybe I'd blow this up and get it bigger. And then we could add more vertices to give it more resolution. And then as we do so, we're going to start seeing more of that detail come through. And then I could recreate that. So I could take out the ground from Cinema, recreate it in After Effects, so that as I push the camera in, I'm actually getting the same hills and all that kind of stuff, except that it interacts with the lighting and anything else that I want to add here, because it's actually a 3D object that's there. So here's the floor with the Josh Pierce map in Mir that I spent like a little bit more time with. And so we can go in with the camera and like we can like, you know, push in. This renders like a little bit more slowly because there's a lot of you know, geometry here and stuff like that. But essentially, you know, like this is an actual 3-dimensional floor that I can light in After Effects. There's ambient light here, so I could turn that on and off. And so I could play with whatever I want to do because it's an actual 3D terrain inside of After Effects. So any questions before we move on from this, or any like talking points or things that I missed or anything?
I'm just having a look. So I think you've covered quite a few of the questions that have come in.
Okay.
There was one about when you were doing the animating part. I think it was Joel was wondering, when would you animate inside of Cinema versus when would you animate inside of After Effects? But then you almost read his mind and read my mind, because you answered the question, which I thought was really great.
Yeah, and it's a really tough answer because it takes a lot of experience. I mean, the short answer is it depends, which is a very unsatisfying answer, because it, you know, you just have to keep in mind, and like as you're trying to figure out where that line is for you, because it is a very gray area thing, yeah, just have to keep in mind the flexibility. Like if you're going to animate something, let's say for example, like you're animating Carl, and you knew that he was going to do something like tilt his head back and roar, and that was an essential part of the action, then doing that in 3D space is probably a better option, even though it's not as flexible, but like it's going to look better. So then if you could bake that into the footage, then the compositor can work around that. That's going to be a better workflow. So like I'm limited here because I can't tilt his head up. I can't do things where like we're seeing the 3D-ness of his body or his head or whatever. Like I can't make his tentacles wrap around the columns or something like that without a lot of work. It'd probably be easier to do that in Cinema. So you kind of like have to play with this workflow a bit before, you know, it makes sense when to do what. Okay, so I'm going to move on to my other deal. I'm calling it Carnage, and I'm not going to save the changes to that. And so I'm going to show you the final product here. Once this finishes opening.
While that's opening, Jim was wondering, what plugin are you using that allows you to go back and forth between Cinema 4D and After Effects?
Oh, that's a great question. So typically, you know, there is a Cineware plugin that allows you to bring in Cinema 4D files. And I actually didn't use Cineware in this instance, but in normal cases, I would use Cineware because, like I mentioned, like I forgot to bring in the object buffers for the coral and the columns and stuff like that. And what I would do in a real world instance, if I had more time, I would go back to Cinema 4D and set up the object buffers, and then just bring in the Cinema 4D file directly into After Effects and just use object buffers. So I wouldn't have to render it in that case. I could just bring in the Cinema 4D file and just take the object buffers from it. But yeah, but then also the thing that made that work, all that stuff that I was doing, is I was rendering out EXRs with AOVs from Redshift. And that's how I was able to access all that data with the Cryptomattes, the emission, all that kind of stuff. We had the AOVs that Elly set up last week. So if you're curious about how to set that up, then check out her session last week, which was also phenomenal and full of great tips and stuff like that too. But yeah, does that answer the question?
It did, yeah, thanks.
Okay, cool. So this is the final thing that we're going to create. Again, we're using Mir to create actual like 3-dimensional geometry. But this was kind of basically because we were having all of those technical issues. I decided that I would just start doing some experiments with like how I could make a scene look underwater. And as I was playing with that, I came up with some interesting things that like I had never done before, which were pretty fun. So I thought that I would just do like a fun little detour for our last like little few minutes of this month and show you what I did. So I started actually in Mixamo, and I found this happy little fella here. Here you guys. So it looks like he's saying, and so he's like Mixamo character, little zombie here. And then what I wanted to do is I wanted to make a mountain, like terrain, out of his face. And so I went into Houdini. Now, we don't talk too much about Houdini in this space. But again, shout out a little commercial for next month with our particles. We are going to be getting a little bit into Houdini particles. And that week, I think it's the week 4 of next month, I will be explaining a little bit more about the basics of Houdini and kind of like what I'm doing here. And I don't have time to do that here. So this will probably feel very unsatisfying, but this is less of a like tutorial and more like a demo of like what you can do in Houdini. Houdini has a thing called HeightFields, and that's basically terrain generation, and it's an extremely powerful tool and actually very simple. Like if you're looking to get into Houdini, HeightFields are like the easiest thing by far that Houdini does, like where you can do something really powerful, but it's also really, really easy, because not many things in Houdini are very easy. So when you first launch Houdini, you have this like network view, and then right here you have the properties panel. So this, and I think you might even have a different arrangement. Like if I right click on the tab here, I can choose what I want, whether I want to see like the network view or the parameters. So you can change your interface very easily that way. But I like to set it up this way because then it mirrors Cinema 4D, which I'm used to. So basically this is kind of like the objects manager in a sense. And then this is like basically kind of like the attributes manager, essentially. So like I select something and then I have its properties here that I can fiddle with. And just like with the Cinema 4D, you know, I have like translate, rotate, scale. So I have like my coordinates, you know, my basic things or whatever. And the way that Houdini works is in kind of like networks, which is a really weird way to work if you're used to any other 3D application. So this here, I'm at my top level, so I can hit the tab key to create a new node, and I'm going to create a geometry network. And then I can double click in here, and now I'm in an empty geometry network. And I'm just going to go ahead and hide other objects from other networks. And I'll just hit tab, and I could just type in HF for height field, and then I hit enter. And then here I have a height field that I can play with. And it's not impressive. This is basically just a volume, like Elly's been talking about in her level up things. A little shout out to Elly in her level up series. Been talking about volumes, but this is just a 2-dimensional volume. And there's just a one sheet of 2D voxels. And then I can play with those. So I could add something like height field noise. And I don't actually have to type in the words. I could type in like random letters from it and it knows. So I just type in HFN and it knows height field noise. Even though F is in the middle of this one word, I type in HFN and it gets the initials. Pretty cool. So I type in height field noise, and I can drag, just like in Redshift, drag the out of the height field into the height field noise. And I'm not seeing it because I need to click on this little guy, which is a render flag. And then now I can see the result of this height field noise. And I could increase the amplitude. I can change the element size. So if I want like more high frequency details, or if I want smoother hills or whatever, under the noise type, I can choose, you know, all these different types of noise, all these different types of terrain and whatnot. And one of my favorite things to do here, I'll just find something that's kind of like basic. Well, let's go back to like, yeah, sparse convolution, make this. And one of my favorite things to do with this is that we have a simulation here actually. So I can, you know, build up my height fields the way that I want. And then I can go to height field erode. And this actually simulates erosion. So, or it will make your screen go like totally black for some reason. No, there we go. So then let's turn off my visualization here. Oops, do that. And turn visualization. And yeah, I guess some weird glitch in Houdini on my laptop when I first apply it, which is weird. Oh, I'm not using the M1 version. The M1 version's in beta, but then it doesn't render correctly. So I'm on an M1 machine. But as I play this, as I step forward and go forward in time, you can see some of the details here that what's happening is it's actually running an erosion simulation. And so it's creating thermal and hydro erosion as I step forward every frame in time. It's like stepping like through time, like where like it's decaying in a very realistic way. So I'm starting to have, as I advance in frames, I'm getting like actual erosion simulations. So I could go back to my height field and up the geometry, blah, 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 whatever. So that's height fields in a nutshell. But here's what I did for my my zombie thing. So I brought in, I had my height field noise, yada yada, and then I brought in my zombie file, and then I chopped his head off, and I used a couple transform things to kind of like move his head. It's kind of funny. I moved his head there. And then what I did is I used something called a HeightField project node. So I created this as my height field, and then I created the HeightField project node, which then takes this file and projects it into my height field. So now this dude, this guy's head, is a height field. So then I used like some like height field blur, some more height field blur to kind of add some decay. And then I added height field noise, and you see that the height field noise applies to the head as well. And that's pretty fun. And then I went and I painted using paint here. I made something called a mask, just kind of like painted a hokey little thing there. And then that allowed me to use a mask to say, you know, where I wanted certain things to be. So then when I went to the end here, I wanted this area to be, let's see, I'm on a laptop. This Houdini is not great with trackpads, but I wanted this area to be flat, like sand dunes. Like I wanted it to be like, this was like a giant that kind of like landed, that Carl killed and then fell. And then, you know, his falling in the ocean floor displaced a lot of this. And so then coral grew around it. And then this was just kind of like regular sand, you know, like the regular beach floor. So it had this kind of like distorted pattern. How are we doing on time? We're doing okay. So I used this mask, which is, or this node, which is pretty fun. And I'll just create a new height field. It's called a height field pattern node. And I'm going to wire in the height field here just to show you what this does. So by default, it's kind of like this really garish thing, and kind of like After Effects, like we saw with like the puppet tool or with the wave world. You know, a lot of the default settings in Houdini are just like super cheesy. So this is, when I apply a height field pattern, it applies stars, which, you know, that's debatable how helpful creating height field stars are. But I can change the pattern to some other things that are a little bit less garish, like stripes. And then with the stripes, I could then go in and distort this pattern and use curl noise to distort this pattern. And I could increase the amplitude. I can change the element size again. And I could fiddle with all of this until I get something that's a little bit more believable. So that still looks terrible, but you could see that it's starting to look a little bit more usable than the stars. And if I come back up here, there's a post blur radius. And so I can kind of smooth that out. And so I kind of fiddled with this until I had what looked like the bottom of the sea. So I come back down here, and this is with my height field pattern. And now you could see that these kind of like sandy areas were created with that height field pattern. So I did all this stuff. I did like an erosion simulation like I was showing you before. And then I spit out, using this height field output node, I spit out a black and white map. And then I brought that into After Effects. And it looked like this. Essentially, it looked like this. But one of the things that I noticed is that there was some stuff that was like off. It was like too sharp. And let's see here. Maybe I can very quickly. You know what I can do? I know what I can do. So basically, when I brought this in, it wasn't as smooth as I wanted. It was, it basically looked like this. I'll go in and I'm just going to solo this. And it basically looked like this. So it looked really cool. I love how you could see like that bone in the nose. Anna probably knows what that is. Like Anna's like an anatomy expert, and I don't know what all of these like parts are called, but that thingy in the nose that skulls have. Like that's more visible in this iteration. I like that, but also it was just too smooth, and I could see some of his teeth, and then in the eye, it just didn't look decayed enough for my liking. So rather than go back to Houdini, because that's a very time-consuming thing to go back and, you know, this is what it looked like in Houdini. This is what it translated to in After Effects, and it's not a one-to-one thing. Like I couldn't exactly tell from this that that's what the result was going to be in After Effects. So I decided what I was going to do is I would pre-compose this map, and I use this in, I brought this into Mir the same way that I did in the last example. And what I did, which I thought was a really cool thing, I've never done this before, is I started adding other layers to this. So like I wanted his teeth, for example, to be more decayed. I'm gonna zoom in. Oops, sorry, trackpad issues here. I created a gray solid, and you can see that if I brought this up, this is kind of what it looks like. And then if I go back over to my map, you can see that it kind of like hollows out the mouth. So then like I just like took down the opacity down to like 35%. And then like I wanted to erode it more. So then I created a map that just like another map here, like it's just like a gray solid. And again, feathered the mask, blended it in. And then what that did was it just smoothed out these edges. It's almost like erosion. It pulled this down. So I was able to, because of Trapcode Mir, I was able to shape this height field and you know, customize it like on the fly in After Effects using these maps. I also wanted his face to be a little bit more like eroded and gross and decayed. So then I created like a fractal noise. I call it a fractal noise tear up. Tore up his face with a little bit of fractal noise. I mean, you could barely even see it right here. I mean, opacity is so low. The contrast is so small. It's very, very, very faint, but it makes a really big difference in adding more detail. See how much more eroded that is? So I was able to really shape and play with this, which was really cool. So, I mean, you don't really actually need Houdini to create these like height field maps if you want to. Like if you want to go in and, you know, create these like wavy lines or whatever, you can do all this from scratch and then use Mir to create a terrain out of it. So I've never done that before, where I'm shaping the maps in After Effects as much. Right? That's what I thought was like a really fun thing to do. It's like a really fun thing to like sculpt terrain in After Effects because this workflow was really fun. So another couple of things that I did that were kind of interesting, I wanted to create caustics on the ground. And if you look, if I preview this, actually just jump to the already rendered version. If you look over here, we have caustics on the ground. And I created that, or I wanted to create that in a similar way that Elly showed us last week, where I had like a Gobo. And let's see, I even created a Gobo, called it Gobo. And I don't think that's here. Let me see if I can't center this. Just reset the position so we can see where it's at. No, can't see that. Basically what I did is I created a solid layer with fractal noise. And the way that you would create caustics normally in After Effects is that you would make the layer 3D. And if I press AA, I can see its material options. And so then what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's casting shadows and that the light transmission is up to 100%. And then just like in Elly's example last week, you put this Gobo right in front of the light. So then the light shines through, and essentially it's transmitting the light from the object onto the thing. The thing is, the problem with this workflow in this case is that this Mir terrain doesn't accept light transmission as far as I know. I couldn't get that to work. So what I had to do was then just use caustics here. I had to just kind of like lower the opacity and use the add mode to kind of move that around and create caustics that way. Another thing that I did, which actually was pretty fun, which I never think of before, I really wanted to get some more caustics on this part of the ground, but the fractal noise thing wasn't working. So I actually used Trapcode Form, and actually I'll solo that layer. Let's see, maybe I'll bring this up a little bit. Yeah, opacity, there we go. So I use Trapcode Form, and if I bring up the opacity, this is what it looks like. So we just have Trapcode Form, so we distorted that. And so then I just like scaled it back a ton and made it like very, 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 very faint. Actually, I'll make it a little bit more like opaque than I normally did. But then if I take this off, you could see the caustics there. I mean, it's overdone, obviously, but then you could see it. So then I dialed it back so that it wasn't anywhere near as bright. But the motion is very similar to the caustics that I wanted. And I had a lot more control over it by using Trapcode Form. So that was kind of a fun thing. And I also did the tricks with the turbulent noise, where it's like kind of like creating this like wavy distortion. Another thing that I did that really helped is, well, I added Renoiser to everything. I did this to Carl as well. The Renoiser effect for the Magic Bullet Suite. This adds noise. I use the Cinema holdout preset, and if I zoom in really closely here, I said if I zoom, there we go. And if I turn this off, there's like the normal way. That's the default, and then there I put a bunch of noise there, because again, whenever I'm looking at underwater footage, and like I know from my experience with cinematography, like water is dirty. Where water is creating a bunch of gunk in front of the lens. Like if you're trying to, unless you have like the best cameras ever, like it's really, really difficult to shoot underwater because there's so much stuff between the lens and the subject, and also waterproof housing that you put over the lens to keep your camera from, getting covered in water. Like that also adds another layer of, apparent gunk. It messes with the optics. So I added a lot of blurs and whatever. So you see, like as we get up close with this, I mean, this is not in focus. Even the things like the head is the thing that's in focus, but even that is not very sharp, because this is how it would be if you were to go underwater. Everything would be a little bit soft and a little bit blurry. And I also added a bunch of optical glow. So I take this off. You can see I added a lot of optical glow because, when light from the surface hits stuff, it has a bunch of water and stuff to diffuse around and kind of becomes a little bit volumetric and spreads out a bit. So that's I found that really added a lot of realism for me. It was like adding some optical glow and having this kind of like radiate out and have like a big size value, so the glow is like kind of emanating out into the water. I used to also use Trapcode Shine to create like light streaks coming down here, like oldie but goodie effect. So it's just kind of a collection of tons of little effects here and there put together to create the final result. But again, the same types of things that we saw in the Carl test with turbulent displacement here, you can see that kind of messing around, and the blurs and the noise, particular little like bubbles kind of like floating up a little bit. There's also some gunk in the water, so same as Carl. But again, I really like that workflow of using Trapcode Mir, because then that rock stuff is actual three-dimensional. So I could move a camera around and just like I would in 3D, but except it's a lot more flexible. So anyways, I think that's like all my stuff. So I ended like 3 minutes early. So I don't know, this might be not real life anymore, because it's not quite to the hour, but
that was incredible. And Jim's put it really nicely. Big round of applause. And I definitely agree, and I'm sure everyone else would. All of those techniques, I mean, you took what was an underwhelming underwater scene from me, and you've made it look legit. That's incredible. All of those techniques are incredible.
Thank you, Elly. And thank you all for watching. It's been like an amazing month, like working with you and Ana, and like this was really like her baby, and it's been amazing to do this like handoff thing. I don't know that we've done like handoffy things before, but nothing to this degree. So it's been just really like gratifying to kind of like have our hands in it and like work together and collaborate on something over time like this. It's been really, really cool. It does feel like when it comes to my shoulders, it's like, oh my God, like I have to like honor like the traditions of my forebears and like, bring glory to this thing that I've done. And so I don't know that I've necessarily done that, but other than that pressure, it's been, thank you. But other than that pressure, it's been like a really, really cool experience for sure.
It has. Can we see the finished result again? Like I just
show
a little bit.
Yes, well, thank you. Let me load up my.
And I totally agree. It's been like, especially for me, this is a totally different series that like I've ever been a part of, and like seeing Ana do the creating Carl and sculpting inside of ZBrush was just like mind-blowing. And then kind of trying to work out an underwater scene inside of like Cinema 4D and Redshift, something I haven't really done because it's kind of quite a challenging thing to do, to then see what you've done Chad just sort of putting it all together in these incredible things, these what seem like really small little things that together all make an incredible difference. And I mean, it just looks incredible. And then also just have to shout out Dustin for being here with us as well. Great.
Yeah, I'm just a fly on the wall.
No, but it's so great having you here, like with all the tips inside of like cinema, especially during like Maya sessions and Redshift, all the information you know about like Redshift and the AOVs, and I know you dive into ZBrush as well. So it's been really great having you kind of on each of these sessions as well.
Yeah, it's been great. Yeah, it's really an awesome month. I've actually watched Ana quite a bit, like ZBrush on YouTube, and she's live. It's been really cool to see not just the series, but also, you know, the other side that she's been working on. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
I guess I'll go next because thank you all so much for having me for this series. It was literally, we were just standing around, we were talking to each other, and we were like, wait a minute, I think we have something going here, right? With an idea to make a quick, basically a TikTok creature that looks epic. And I can't believe it happened so fast. And you all like took my little Kraken and just took it to the next level. This is epic, like capital letters, epic, right?
That's awesome. Yeah, it's just
raise
really
the bar
cool.
for sure. That's for sure. It looks so cool. You all did such an amazing job. I want you to do this for all my creatures from now on.
Hey, I wouldn't mind.
Right?
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
super fun.
I'd be up for it. No, we had to do the incredible model justice, and the fact that you've been continuously working on Carl on your live streams as well is even cooler. And there's so many lovely comments.
Baby, you know.
Yeah, people were saying you might become the new Maxon mascot. And people were agreeing. So yeah, we've had some great comments. So Jim was saying agree on epic. Joel, you cracked it. I like that.
Oh, nice.
And people want to see more of this, like whole series doing a workflow, and I fully agree. Like, I'm definitely up for that. So Blair was saying was some more of that Houdini workflow as well. I agree. Yeah, I want to see more Houdini. So Chad,
cool.
Get on that.
All right. Good. I was like a little like scary territory to venture into, but I'm glad that some people at least were digging it. That's cool. Good.
No, it was great. It was great. Well, yeah, I guess we'll wrap this up. I'm gutted it's over, but it's been such an amazing series, and as we can see by the comments, people are absolutely loving it, and I can't wait to be doing something like this again. And it's such an amazing final result. So yeah, well done everyone. Good team effort.
Yeah.
And thanks to everyone for their great questions throughout this entire month, and suggestions, because that's what we love to do, especially on these live sessions. Hear from you, create the stuff live, the problems as well as like the solutions. They all come together. So yeah, thank you.
And thanks to Dr. Sassy, because I was all over the place today. So Dr. Sassy's job making the YouTube things is not going to be easy. Sorry, Dr. Sassy, and thank you for all you do.
Cool. Well, I hope everyone has a great rest of their Monday and a great week. And yeah, we'll catch you on another session soon.
Sweet.
Oh, yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.